Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Just going to wait another minute just for a few others to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, looks like we're having a few more numbers join, which is great. All right, so good afternoon all. I'm Ben Reynolds from CXC. Thanks for joining us today and our trusted partner Korn Ferry for this great session where we're going to be looking at strategies around building a business case for positive change with your talent strategy. Obviously at CXC and Korn Ferry we work with organisations that obviously have this challenge when they're trying to create change, and hopefully today with some great guest speakers we'll be able to provide some value to everyone that's in attendance. Just a few housekeeping. Obviously, as part of this session, if you do have any questions as we're going through, please add them to the chat function at the top, and we'll look to get to those at the end. Obviously, we've got some content to cover, a few questions, etc. for the guest speakers. So but any questions, we'll endeavour to get to those at the end. Please pop them in the chat. Now I'm going to pass over to Jane from Korn Ferry, who's going to introduce our speakers today and get started on our session. Over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jane Cumbies. I'm part of the RPO leadership team here at Korn Ferry. We've got a brilliant panel for you today. Before we jump into the questions, I will hand over to them to do a brief introduction. So, Amy, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Schultz, and I've been in the talent and tech space for, I think, close to 25 years now, and have spent many of those years leading talent teams, hiring across perm and contingent. I've been at Korn Ferry now for about a year, and work across sort of tech and talent strategy consulting needs of our RPO clients.
Thanks, Amy. Mike?
G'day, guys. Mike Gauchi here. I've been leading contingent solutions for about 15 years, mostly in APAC, but more recently in a global role with Canva, where I've been there for about 2.5 years. I've overseen programs for Samsung, Microsoft, Deloitte, Toyota, CBA, NAB, and some others across different industries too. So I've had a bit of a cross-section of experience across different businesses and industries. Basically, I've had roles where I've delivered the strategy and the process and the management of the team for contingent workforces and making sure the model is aligned to the overall business strategy and the goals of the business. Very relevant today, and looking forward to the chat around maybe a case for change. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jane, and hi everyone. I'm Chris Parker, currently leading talent acquisition at AMP. And I've also been working in the talent industry for just over 25 years now, across many different organisations and industries, both in the UK and Australia. So I'm focused on how we build workforce capability across permanent early careers and contingent hiring at AMP, but particularly how we create stronger governance, cost management, and better experience for hiring managers and candidates. Looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So a mature panel for you all today. I won't say old. Great. Let's jump into
it. Yeah, seasoned. I like that, Mike. Experienced. War stories.
All right, let's jump in. So, Amy, I'm going to start with you. So stepping back to the broader global workforce landscape, what are some of those major trends that you are seeing emerge, and how are they showing up inside organisations today?
One of the, I think, the pull factors for me to join Korn Ferry was kind of the global purview that we get to have. And right now, Jane, I see there's sort of 4 interconnected mega trends. The first one, no surprise, kind of the pace of tech innovation. And as we would all be experiencing, like things are moving so quickly now that like the workforce and our op models and our structures and our policies just aren't keeping up. And I think this pace is then driving the second mega trend around emerging skills and jobs. If you think, 5 years ago, we weren't really hiring AI prompt engineers. And Mike, I saw Canva yesterday announced its first chief algorithm officer. And so it's so interesting kind of to see the domains that are now emerging. And this third trend then is generational shifts. And these are amplifying the skills gaps. Like, would you believe that the first cohort of Gen Xers, maybe there's a couple of Gen Xers on this call, just turned 60? And so these shifts, along with kind of the change in skills and jobs, require access to the fourth trend, which is distributed talent centres, to really kind of help solve these talent challenges. So as you can see, like the trends really do interconnect and compound. Like if you get one right, creates leverage in others, and if you miss one, then it drags all four down. And why I think these trends are really relevant for this audience is I see contingent hiring and contingent talent as kind of that strategic thread that can help organisations navigate some of these headwinds. Like obviously when a role didn't exist 5 years ago, talent pipeline is going to be pretty small. So contingent hiring will continue to help plug short-term gaps real time. And then the pace of change is making it even harder for companies to kind of nail that all elusive strategic workforce planning. And here in Australia, like 40% of Australia's like skilled trades workforce is over 45. And then we're sort of creating almost these future talent pipelining challenges for ourselves by maybe pulling back on grad programs and also removing management layers, sort of creating what we call at Korn Ferry the missing middle. And that's happening across industries. So while we have experienced workers approach retirement over the next 10 to 15 years, we're not actually, I feel, filling the bucket like we once were. So again, contingent workforce models, I see, are really uniquely positioned to help organisations kind of navigate these mega trends.
Thanks, Amy. It's really interesting. Mike and Chris, I'm going to throw to you now, and I'm keen to hear from both of you on a couple of these questions because I know you come from very different industry sectors, so your perspectives will be really interesting here. Mike, I'll start with you. Across the different programs and clients that you've supported, what were the early signs that contingent workforce model needed to evolve, and how did you really identify that it was time to drive that change?
Yeah, so I feel like for every organisation I've worked with or for, there's been an overlap of common themes like compliance, hiring manager and contingent worker experience, speed to hire, quality of hire. But there's always been that sort of particular company nuance. One particular example, I worked with an organisation in the defence sector, and their major challenge was national sourcing capability. They had one supplier who could deliver in a couple of states, but couldn't cover the full region. And therefore they were spending loads of money in these pockets because of that sourcing gap. So that was a cost challenge. Another organization in the banking sector, that was more about they just didn't know what they didn't know. There was poor visibility, no consistent systems internally, but a lot of anecdotal noise about poor outcomes. So it was just about getting something started, getting something centralized in terms of data. And then they found the challenges, which were lots of cost issues, rogue statement of work spend where it should have been agency spend, invoicing nightmares, inconsistencies around rates, poor compliance and different things. But without that visibility, there's really no way of understanding what you've got under the hood. And the legislation around different worker types like casuals and fixed term employees, even in Australia, it changes so much. It's like playing whack-a-mole. Like it's really difficult for organizations without a key partner or central model and technology. You might get on top of something and then it changes. I mean, this year we've got coming up the payday super piece, which for independent contractors, for certain independent contractors, they're still eligible to receive super. And if they're being if you're processing invoices on a monthly basis, you need to be paying super on a monthly basis. Are your teams ready to do that? Like it's really challenging for organizations to wrap around all, and I'm just talking about Australia here. We've got different countries, different things going on. The other key piece to this is I think a lot of organizations will wait, and this has been my experience. They'll wait till they get to a certain size where they think, oh, we've got the volume now, so let's look at this. My advice would be, if there's an anticipation of growth, get it in now, because organizations will partner with you, or you can build the right model to grow with that particular partner. It's easier to onboard workers through that new model versus transition. Transitions obviously, they can happen. They happen over a stage period of time. They can be more challenging. You can do them, but the preference would be, if you think this is going to be an area investment, you probably need to look at it before it gets too big, not when it's already too big, because then your problems will be at scale.
Thanks, Mike. Chris, what were some of those early signs for you? Was it around that sort of cost and risk and scale, or were there other drivers?
Yeah, so I think there was the example I've got is it's not particularly one issue, it's just systemic issues across the organisation. So operationally, the environment become really complicated and fragile. So multiple technologies involved, handoffs and processes stitched together kind of over time because of mergers and acquisition and just growth, to Mike's point. So kind of individually, they kind of worked, but collectively, they were hard to understand, hard to maintain, and expensive to change. So this kind of showed up as a kind of process breakdowns and a lot of exceptions to the process, and the growing reliance on kind of workaround knowledge just to get stuff done. So from the business perspective, there were three kind of pressures that made this unsustainable. So scalability, the model didn't flex easily as demand changed. Risk, so tenure management was a key issue, and life cycle events weren't managed consistently. And then lastly, obviously, cost and efficiency, not just the spend on contractors, but the rework and escalations and the toll it was taking on the business. So for leaders and the P&C team that I was in, it's near constant kind of escalations, damage, and just noise that just got in the way of you try and do your day job. So that's when we kind of shift the conversation to simplification, standardization, and more scalability.
Yeah, great.
Chris,
Thanks.
just listening to you, then I was getting some PTSD from like being in that period of time. Mike, kind of before you joined and helped at Canva, the constant fire drills and escalations. So I can relate.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so again, for Mike and Chris, creating that business case is often a little bit overwhelming in terms of, where do you start? Do you even want to start? Do you want to go down that rabbit hole? You know that you should, but it is a challenge. So what are some of those, key data points or stories that have proven most powerful in convincing your senior leaders or cross-functional partners that there's a business case?
Yeah, I can jump in first. I feel like, and especially what I've learned over the last few years, that every business area is going to have a bit of a nuanced feel and interest in contingent workforce. So unfortunately, it's not a simple central case for change. It's, I think, one document or one story for the whole business. I think there needs to be enough discovery done to unpack for each of those particular areas what is going to really resonate with them. You might talk to people, for example, if they're hiring lots of marketing types, it might be about contingent worker experience, or the way that we can identify conversions to permanent and better partner on that side. It might be in some other area that the focus is really about cost saving. For example, we've identified in the IT team, there's really this disparity of worker rates and no real rate cards being used, or high margin for some agencies. So cost saving could be a great lever to pull there. I also have found, surprise, surprise, like humans want to hear real life stories, like give examples of how something hasn't worked, whether that be the process flow of a contingent worker and it resulting in a poor outcome, somebody leaving, or not having the right governance around what supplier we've added. We've added a supplier who hasn't met their compliance standard. Explain what's happened, and that will bring it to life a bit better. We're obviously going to need to have that data in there about maybe some dollar figures or speed to hire improvements and stuff like that. But I would weave through that real life examples of where things aren't working, feedback from hiring managers, senior leaders, because I feel like the further you go up, and if you're in an organization where you have multiple people who need to approve and look at these things, it's probably going to resonate more with them. That's been the thing that's most interesting to me in the last few years, is seeing that come to life, and that they want to hear that real tangible stuff.
Thanks, Mike. And Chris, what about for you?
Yeah, so I think so similar to Mike, I think Mike, going back to my example, we really landed the business case on and reframing the conversation from just optimizing the process to focusing on the tactical and strategic benefits of the organization. So we looked at sort of the data showing the fragmentation, so the multiple systems, the contracts, and engagement paths driving inconsistency, and those stories that Mike talked about. So the onboarding delays, the repeated escalations, the workarounds, that kind of really got the buy-in from the business. And then simplification, I'll probably keep banging on about this today, but consolidating the disjointed technology and processes into a standardized service model, moving supplier and agency management to a single MSP to improve performance management, really kind of was the key focus. Some of the kind of unexpected savings, we got like fewer systems and process breakdowns, fewer non-standard engagements and exceptions, and reduced technology licensing costs as well. So our business case is really focused on 3 kind of ROI elements: the tenure and compliance management, leader and contractor satisfaction was really important to us, and then the overall workforce visibility. Because once the visibility improves, the cost and risk and control kind of flow from there.
Yeah, totally agree. It's interesting what you find also once you've got the visibility. It's almost like you don't know what you don't know, as I said before. We worked with one organization where we identified, after having, I think it was about 18 months of data, that we found that referrals were disproportionately paid more than agency source candidates across many areas. So managers were more comfortable to go above rate cards or to the top of rate cards for people that they were bringing in directly. And you have, obviously you've got there's MSP fees and recruitment agency fees, but the pay rate to the contractors is where a lot of that raw cost, you can look at through just optimization of the rate card and making sure you're getting the right value for those individuals. And so that spawned a whole project of, identifying and making sure that there was enough due diligence in the referral process, and that we weren't, often the problem was that TA weren't involved, and it was, I've already done the negotiation, I haven't looked at a rate card, I've offered this amount of money, and it's off and running, and the horse is bolted, then you can't retract that and kind of speak to the manager and say, well, next time that's, you've spent about 25% more than what we needed to for that particular role, etc. So these hidden costs and opportunities come up. The other one is what I've found has been quite typical is that recruitment agencies might have a payroll only option, and without a centralized model, that's spitting out to multiple providers who don't have a big share. So they're not prepared to give you a good discount on payroll because there's so many with a small amount. A lot of the models we put in centralized payroll through a provider, for example, CXC, and there might have been a 12-month, let's say, exclusive period for the recruitment supplier who had them, and their sourcing fees would last for 12 months. Then they would route to the central payroll fee, which was a discounted rate. And if you're applying that at scale nationally or even beyond nationally, that's a significant saving and better service too, because you've actually got a provider who's wrapping around that service and really cares about it because they're quite committed to deliver it, as opposed to 10 suppliers kind of dabbling in that area.
I think, your comments around often you don't know what you don't know. It takes me back to my early days in internal recruitment where we wanted to explore contingent, and I got someone from CXC along to meet with me, and his first question was, well, how many contractors do you have? And I was like, don't know. How many different agencies are you using? Don't know.
I imagine if you had $1, Ben, for perhaps every time a client had said don't know, we'd probably be doing this webinar live from a boat, I imagine. And I mean, just thinking like building on that, so you don't know what you don't know. And Mike and Chris, listening to you there, something that I think I learnt early on when putting together a business case was I assumed too much knowledge. And realised how much actual education we needed to do on just like what a contingent work was, full stop. And so that probably slowed some momentum down there. So the old "don't assume" is words to live by, I've found.
100%. Yeah, the conversations, especially with hiring managers at that level who are the decision makers, or often one level removed from the decision makers, have fixed term contracts, maximum term contracts, contractors, temp agencies, casuals. It's confusing, and they're often not knowing which channel to use. Also, add into the mix statement of work and vendors. So I completely agree, Amy. One of the first things that I came in and saw actually at Canva was a piece of work that had started. I think you triggered it with Harriet. It was about identifying use cases and the right worker type underneath that use case. So at least we're channeling in the right places. And of course, some of those can be grey, but you've got TA kind of going, what's the closest fit, and helping the hiring manager make that decision. I think that's super important. But yeah, we saw a lot of just not purposeful behavior that was rogue. It was just not understanding what the right engagement method was for that particular gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've both sort of referenced different stakeholders having different agendas and different focuses and drivers and things like that. Two of the main stakeholders that we often deal with in outsourcing, either procurement or HR, and they can be very different processes and have very different objectives. So I'm keen to hear, with contingent workforce strategy, how have you both built alignment and a shared vision between those two functions when they are coming from quite different places?
Shall I go first
this time? It's your turn.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, procurement, typically come at this from a commercial discipline perspective, and then people and culture to kind of workforce and kind of quality outcomes. Where I've seen this work really well is where you just align on a shared ambition, and particularly when you're working through the business case, but where you've got a fragile, bespoke model. The aim is to be simple, efficient, and compliant, because kind of both of those teams want the same thing. So we kind of got aligned on standardization, performance management, and risk and control. So that worked really well. And what that meant in practical terms was kind of going for a single MSP model, getting clear ownership of supplier performance, and then joint governance over the same data set as well.
Yeah, that resonates. I've managed programs that have sat in HR operations, TA, procurement, and I think there's a sentiment that, for example, procurement focus heavily on cost, and of course they are incentivized in ways on cost. So that's definitely there. But I've worked with people in procurement who really deeply care about other things like quality of hire and speed, and they want to partner and focus on that. So really, I think it comes down sometimes to the individual, and also how the company incentivizes certain areas, that you have that challenge potentially of aligning. But I think the central key to performance has been, like you said, Chris, alignment up front and all the way up to leadership alignment, back to the use cases example, making sure that we're really clear as an organization, how are we going to utilize contingent workforce, whether it's local, global, whatever it might be, what's the rules of engagement around that, so that we're all clear, and therefore we can really start to set some objectives, and we can set KPIs and SLAs around that performance, because we both understand each other. So irrespective of TA ownership or procurement ownership, there's that clarity and alignment. And education, Amy, you mentioned education before. I think that's key. So once you've got that alignment, having those education sessions with the people on the ground who are engaging contractors and contingent workers so that they're up to speed on how to go find a new contingent worker, the best practices and the do's and don'ts in that engagement to make sure we're driving compliance and all those sorts of things. But yeah, I guess to summarize, it's the clear and sort of shared vision between those teams, and not necessarily, I haven't really seen it work better or worse in any area. It's just about the connectedness between them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So now as we've established, we've been in recruitment for a very long time. And in recruitment, we love to talk about our achievements. But Mike, I'm keen to hear about an approach to change that hasn't gone as expected, and what were some of those valuable lessons that you've learned?
So many lessons. It's like I coach a soccer team, my daughter's soccer team, and we either win or learn is the kind of message, and we do a lot of learning in my soccer team. We're learning every week. So there's as you say, yeah, we love to celebrate the wins, and I've often had this interesting different perspective when I used to work in the consulting space, and we used to win an MSP. We used to all celebrate. And as the operational person delivering it, I would be sort of half celebrating and half going, how are we going to, get this to work? It's less about a celebration. I'd like to celebrate a year later. That's what I like to celebrate, when it's all humming. But I've found the typical theme is that 80% of the noise will come from 20% of the users. That has happened pretty much 9 times out of 10 for every model I've had. And you spend a disproportionate amount of time supporting that 20%. And I think the key, and I can reel off multiple examples. Like we had a blue collar client where the model was working really, really well. It was a master vendor solution. Sourcing was fine. We were fulfilling roles. It was a good cost effective solution. But then there was a business unit that had a very specific demand, which required instant and immediate response to things that would go wrong. It was actually a cleaning piece, actually. So there was a shutdown. They needed to clean particular buildings, etc. That model didn't work. We needed a vendor neutral model where cost became less of a thing, because we have a unique window to source people for a week, but you can't rely on one supplier. They're not going to deliver that. You need to have 4 or 5 suppliers competing for that work. And the pain we went through, to get to the point where the client agreed to change the model, I think the key is, and in my opinion now, and actually getting a bit older and wiser, find these things in discovery. If you can do that, look under all the rocks, make sure you've really understood. And organizations will be flexible with the model, and you can address them ahead of time. It's going to be a lot easier for you to do it, rather than find out about it 6 months, 12 months later when commercials have been agreed, contracts then have to be changed, new KPIs and all that sort of stuff. If you can get it early and prior to implementation, and address it with your change team and manipulate the model in such a way that you can deliver to that 20%, I think you'll be a lot happier and keep more hair.
Is that how you lost your hair?
Oh, of course. Nothing to do with my wife and kids.
All right, we'll move on. Chris, you have a lot of experience motivating teams through big periods of transformation. How do you help others see that workforce evolution is not just a compliance project, but as an opportunity to create real business value?
Yeah, so I think, again, to the example I was talking about earlier, yeah, we deliberately refrain from just being a compliance uplift. Obviously, compliance is critical, but it's not a compelling change story on its own. So we focus on 4 things that we thought that the leaders really cared about. So simplicity, so fewer systems, fewer decisions, clearer pathways; efficiency and less rework, fewer escalations and faster engagement; compliance, so risk managed through the worker life cycle, not after the event. So actually just in terms of how we work and how we operated. And then lastly, cost effective, so cheaper operations, less sunk cost, and more service with the same investment. So this wasn't about adding control, it was just removing that unnecessary complexity in the organisation. If the new approved model is simpler than the workaround, then the adoption kind of happens naturally, and that we've definitely seen that happen. I think probably the other thing from a change management perspective, we had really strong support from ExCo, so from our Chief Technology Officer, where most of the contingent workforce is, and our Chief People Officer. So they were kind of joined at the hip on driving this change, which made a huge difference in terms of uptake. We also had our some of the directors from our People and Culture team actually leading calls with the frequent hiring managers. So again, the business could really see that we were invested in this change, and I think that really helped with the adoption early on.
Great, thanks, Chris. Awesome. All right, final question for me. I'm going to throw it to all of you. If you could give one piece of advice to someone starting to build their business case for change today, what would it be? And I will start with Mike.
Never give up, and celebrate little wins. So I guess depending on the organisation you work for, the case for change might be so straightforward. Like it might be a very significant dollar figure that you can put in front of the right people that will get the motivation to move forward, or an experience improvement, or a speed to hire piece, whatever it might be. It might be so obvious that you go forward, but if you don't have that, and you've got, potential confusion or a lack of alignment on moving forward and picking up a new model, I would say step by step. Step one, understand really well what the current state is, understand really well where the organisation is going and what you want to achieve, and then assess the gap. Is the model fit to take us to that next stage? What is it about the model that's not going to get us there, or it's going to be slower or far more costly to get us there? So I would say, yeah, move it. If you have to move it forward inch by inch, do that. Don't give up, especially when you know it's the right thing. Look at the right levers. Make sure you're speaking across finance, HR, TA, procurement, IT, legal. Like, speak to all the people. They're probably facing some kind of challenge with contingent. You just don't know about it yet. There might be a team of accounts payable people like just on fire trying to manage contractor payments. And if you get those stories and bring all of them together, you'll have a compelling case. And the only other thing I'll say is pilots are a great idea. Test and learn. If you can get an area of the business that's motivated and it's really clear that they're on board, maybe you can look at piloting something. Maybe it's one country, maybe it's one business area, maybe it's even one team, depending on the size of the business, because then you can utilize that to tell the story about the exponential opportunity you've got if you can look at the model more broadly. And once again, it's still a win. So you've moved something forward, and you can see how you can go from there.
Thanks, Mike. Great advice. Chris?
I think be really honest about the cost of complexity, and then really focus the business case on simplification, standardization, and outcomes the business really values. So as Mike said, really understanding across all the different teams and stakeholders in the organization and externally as well, as understanding that and to really focus on standardization and simplification.
Thank you. And Amy?
Oh, thanks, Jane. I think sort of building on Chris's point around focusing on what the business cares about and probably doing it in language that they understand, I think really sort of helps with a business case. And Mike, your point around the collaboration, and I think that was something that worked really effectively for us at Canva, was kind of bringing a collective squad together of all of the teams that touch some component of contingent. And I think in doing so, that shows I guess broader business thinking, and that might actually help when it comes to HR and procurement, kind of those two stakeholder groups you mentioned before, Jane, because procurement are going to want to know that whatever solution that you're putting forward is going to solve for the broader business. Whereas sometimes I think in HR we can be kind of guilty of trying to solve for some of our own needs. So I think that can help bridge the gap.
I totally agree. It's a mindset shift. And I think probably I've struggled with it and I've gotten better at it. But with the experience that you might have, let's say that you've got some great experience running programs, you might go into an organization and think, I know exactly what we need to do here. Like we need to do A, B, C, D. But
famous last words.
Yep. It's not the cookie cutter often doesn't work. I know exactly
what we need to do. Narrator voice. She didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And applying some of the methods that might have worked over here aren't always going to work over there. So it's just a different mindset. It's like an openness to being challenged and being comfortable with being challenged and adopting different perspectives, because it might take longer in the upfront discovery and you'll have more opinions baked in, but you'll have better adoption later and a better model that's going to work, which I think is far more important. If you take a little bit longer at the front end, you'll have a model that's going to work more effectively anyway for the business.
Learn before you win, Mike. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. Thanks, team. That brings me to the end of my question. So I will hand back to Ben now.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Amy. Some great insights there. So really appreciate your time today. We do have a question, which I might even direct this one at you, Mike. So just keep you on your toes. Just around sort of economic uncertainty. Obviously, you're in a Canberra, which is obviously a global business. So I imagine that's sort of impacting, I guess, your sort of total talent strategy. So just how are you sort of working with that sort of current sort of economic uncertainty?
Yeah, I think these days there's a lot more structure now into how the organization considers growth and what the different approaches might be for certain markets. So yes, there's economic uncertainty. It's highly publicized. Canberra is doing well, but there are certain countries where Canberra doesn't have strong market penetration yet. Heaps of opportunity. Like we might have 1 in 20 in that country utilizing the tool, and we can get that down to 1 in 10 or 1 in 6. However, there's a much more thought out approach to how we go into those countries with a combination of EOR. So rather than setting up an entity in that particular location, there might be a structural setup of an EOR until we've identified that, yeah, this is a long-term market for us. So it might be a 12-month arrangement that, depending on performance in that particular location, we move forward. But probably a little bit different to how it was thought before, was overconfidence around that delivery and maybe not the right structural setup. So I think how we're approaching the uncertainty piece is know the different options that you have, the different workforce levers that you have relevant to the challenge, and then be able to then flex if you've reached a point where you've got an opportunity to drive further and set up an entity or start employing permanent employees.
Mike, did anyone else want to touch on that one, or no? Happy with that answer? All right, I've got some more questions. Okay, what will total talent look like when AI is deeply embedded in workforce planning? This might be one for you, Amy. I know you're passionate about this.
Happy days. If we get to a point where AI is heavily embedded in workforce planning, bring that on. And I think, until such time, right, we need to, probably bring it back to those kind of 4 trends that I touched on earlier. The being aware and across kind of the generational shifts, the emerging skills and jobs, and thinking about creative ways to bridge those gaps. And I don't think it's personally probably realistic for us to think about strategic workforce planning as that like 2, 3, 4, 5 year out. Like I think until AI is embedded in workforce planning, like AI is and the speed in which it continues to shift, like just with Anthropic launching a new model last week and like using Claude 2 weeks ago to today. Wow, like it's so much different and so much better. So I think we need to think about planning in shorter increments, 6, 12 months out, and we also then need to think about that in terms of like internally with succession planning. Like I think traditional succession planning for companies that do that, they still think kind of 2-3 years out, and I think we need to bring that right back as well. And I don't advocate for thinking in quarters, because you just never kind of get traction on things, but probably a 6 to 12 month outlook is more realistic. And again, I do think contingent hiring will continue to therefore be a lever that companies can pull on while they're trying to sort of figure out what work needs to be done next week, the people that they have to do that work, and then the skills that they have. And I guess that's kind of at its heart what sort of underpins workforce planning in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Amy. And one final question, I guess it's sort of around, probably a bit more targeted around sort of visibility in that. So in terms of if sort of boards and that sort of start demanding, sort of workforce visibility across the organisation, like live, real-time visibility, are most organisations ready? So maybe just a quick comment on that. Maybe Chris, if you can sort of pick that one up.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're ready yet. I think, but just kind of touching on that point and the previous question, I think we've got a few pilots going on around task intelligence, so really understanding the work that is done internally. So we've had some really interesting results so far, and I think that's where the future is going to be in terms of using AI to understand the workforce needs better. I think, in my experience, we've just replaced roles without really thinking thoroughly around whether we can break the job up, whether it's contingent or perm. So I think there's a real opportunity to start looking at, when should we deploy an agent, when should we go contingent, when we should be BPO. And I think a lot of that is very reactionary still. So I think there's the opportunity, and I think some of the AI tools that are out there are starting to help with that.
Exactly, that build, buy, borrow, bot, bounce. And I'm sure we've all, the ROI that we're getting from AI tools at the moment is probably not where we thought it would be. And I think the kind of the knee-jerk reaction can be to blame the tool, but I think it's often an op model challenge. And to your point, Chris, actually understanding the work at a task level. And coming back to the question around like the role boards can play, I think boards can really challenge their executive team around how they're showing up as AI-ready leaders. And, is there an overarching kind of vision and strategy? Are they kind of focusing on their own sort of, self-development in terms of the change management that's required? I think that's really important. And I also think the C-suite have a really interesting opportunity to collaborate in ways that they haven't done before. So I saw in the chat, is work like kind of workforce transformation in the area of AI more finance driven than HR? I think it's both with IT. I think there's that kind of three-legged stool between your CTO, your CPO, and probably your CFO. And all three should be working across AI strategy from an investment point of view, a technology point of view, and then a change and enablement. And I'm not yet seeing kind of enough organisations think of it that way. And I think that's where the board can sort of perhaps advise and influence as well.
Yeah, completely agree. And supporting staff through the change, enabling them to grow their skills in these areas, and being mindful that through the transition, BAU needs to continue. Like until this process has been supported by an agent or a new piece of technology has cut operational time by 50%, they're still performing the jobs. And so being mindful that they have to continue doing their job whilst learn, and potentially, teams will reshape, won't they? Like particular teams will get smaller, others will grow, and proactively supporting staff through the education they need to upskill to potentially go into different roles. So there's lots to do.
Yeah.
Certainly is. Well, thanks all. Thanks everyone for attending. Obviously, as a thank you for attending, we've got a few things that we'll be sending out, sort of post the webinar. So we will be putting together an ebook with sort of the key themes that have been discussed today, and also answering a few additional questions. Also, we'll be sending out a checklist as well to sort of help you start building your business case. And again, another offer that we're able to offer today as well is we're happy to set up a discovery session where we can sort of talk you through how do you go about, like James sort of mentioned at the start, we didn't even know how many contractors we had. How do you go about finding, how many contractors you've got, what potential risks are out there, what potential cost savings are there. So we've been doing it at CXC for over 30 years now, so we've certainly got some experience in that. So we're happy to run a session with you. So there'll be further details in the pack that we send out on how to sort of register for one of those as well. So thanks again to the guest speakers, thanks to our partners Korn Ferry, and thanks all for joining us today. Have a great rest of the week.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.